The initial education material will be worked through tennis and staff, that initial distribution. And then I think as far as working the Environmental Commission in, it will be important during their annual report and review by the Environmental Commission. One of the reasons for that annual review is to look at their performance, and to tennis is required in this work report to discuss other ways that they can promote recycling, and maybe one of those ways will be improving upon education. So it probably won't be until next year that the Environmental Commission really has some hands-on feedback to tennis. But to date, tennis has been very good to work with. They've given us a draft of the distribution letter that they're going to be sending out, and a draft of that educational tag. So we hope to work with them. Clearly, this was a concern, as you indicated, by the Environmental Commission because of Eureka's past experience at really promoting that educational component, and tennis coming in now as our recycler and not really having that experience. We do want to work closely with them, and we found them to be very receptive to our comments. So I think that's how we'll proceed, is through staff, and then again during that performance review.
Thank you. Ms. Schoenemann.
Well, first of all, you did enumerate all the highest points of this contract, but I want to point out to some people, because one of the reasons people were giving for wanting to go to single stream was when they would have a wheeled container. So I want everybody to be aware that that is not the option that was chosen, and that we are using the existing city bins. Even though we are changing contractors, you will still be using the red bin. There's no magic wheels coming into your garage. I had a question also on the educational piece, and I understand putting out one as soon as possible, and even if we only requested once a year, I would like some thought put to possibly doing another one like mid-spring or so, simply because we have changed contractors, and the previous, or our current contractor, which will become our previous contractor, did occasional mailings along the way just to remind people of what was collected and that type of thing. And there is a danger with single stream that people will think they can throw anything in that bucket just because they can throw 1 through 6. So there are still things you can't recycle, so I think we need a little bumper in the spring to say, okay, don't throw this in the bin because it's not okay. And along that same line, I want Willie and Greg to know that this is an important piece. It was to the Environmental Commission. It's very important to me, is the tagging of bins where inappropriate things are left behind. That is a very important piece of the continuing education. That even though you're recycling a lot of things, there are some things that are not okay, and the only way people really learn is if it's left there with an explanation. So I would ask you to be very vigilant about that piece. I think it's extremely important. And I'm hoping that we will continue as a city, that would be staff and us and you, to re-emphasize that we're not only about recycling, but we're about reducing the overall waste stream and reusing things. That's part of the whole program. Otherwise, it becomes what I call the 40-year-old 1960s Boy Scout project. Oh, good, they're collecting cans. Okay, well, I'll throw this in the recycling bin, and then my obligation is done. And if we don't start looking at the other two pieces of that whole circle, we're never going to be out of this mess. Pardon the use of the word mess. Anyway, so I think that's a really important piece.
Mr. Nephew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions for staff, and I also have a couple of questions for the for tennis when they come up, when we have a chance to ask them. For staff, I wanted to start by asking, does tennis have experience with doing this pickup currently in other cities? I believe they do, but I just want to confirm that.
I'm sorry, I'll answer because I live in Woodbury, and they do pick up my recycling in a bin.
Okay, all right. And the reason for that is just to make sure that you know, from the standpoint of their signing on to a contract, that they understand all of the terms and have familiarity with all of the requirements, and operationally are not going to get blindsided by, oh, it turns out it's too hard to do this thing, or something like that.
And more pickier than Woodbury.
Yes, and certainly Kathy is pickier than Woodbury, and the rest of us strive to be like Kathy, but it's very difficult. The other question that I had about staff, somewhat related to the details in the contract, on page 16 of the contract, there's a long section, somewhat most of the page is a section called liquidated damages, and these are they're not fines, but they're penalties that are assessed for failure to do various things if customer service issues aren't dealt with, or if the residual rate is exceeded, and so forth. Is that a common clause in collection contracts? Do we have something comparable in the expiring agreement with Eureka, for example? And how is the money withheld from them if it's assessed, or is there some other method of collecting it?
Sure. Mayor, Council, it's a good question, Council Member Nephew, on that. This was the same provision that we just carried over from the previous contract we had with Eureka, and we've got the same dollar amount associated with those infractions. And this is standard language now. I'm happy to report that this came out of the City of Maplewood's initial contract, and we were the first city that actually had liquidated damages put in the contract as performance measures, and this has become a standard piece of all recycling contracts now.
Very good. For the duration of the contract with Eureka, are you aware, have we ever exercised this clause to assess damages?
Mayor, Council, I'm happy to say that we have not, and I'm hopeful that we can continue that relationship with tennis as well.
Thank you. I think the thing I'm mostly, well, not mostly, but one of the things that struck me in reading through the contract was obviously something that's in the background, and we have a meeting coming up next week, is the topic of organized trash collection. And one of the concerns that people often raise is, well, what can be done if somebody doesn't do a good job. And so I think that people who are curious about how you can have an agreement to hold people to a standard of performance can go online and look at this agreement that we're considering tonight and see that it's worked well for years, and it's something that another hauler is happy to sign on to. And it provides a good example of how it can be done in a practical way. And so I'm glad to hear that that's in there and doesn't seem to pose any problem. And the remainder of my questions, I think, are for the applicant or contractee, whatever you would call them.
Are there any other questions that we have of the staff report? Skillful, did we signed up for this? Would one or both of the Tennis brothers like to come up? Introduce yourselves, please.
Mayor and Councilman, I'm Willie Tennis.
Greg Tennis.
Let's see, and Greg, you're the older one?
Nope.
No? Oh my goodness, Willie, you're well preserved.
Thank you.
Either that or you use Grecian formula and your brother doesn't. I want
Stress
to...
does that to you, so I let Greg have all the stress.
I see. I want to just start the conversation by saying in the recent few months, I've had, and I know the other council members, have had lots of opportunity to have comments made about your work in being a sanitation hauler. And I can tell you that I have heard that your staff is friendly and knowledgeable, and that you do an excellent job servicing your clients. And so I look forward to hopefully a long and fruitful relationship between Maplewood and your company to take care of our recycling. So thank you very much for what you've done for our residents so far, and we look forward to more. As you know, Mr. Nephew had a couple questions he'd like to ask you.
Sure.
So we'll let him do that.
Thanks. The first one is, well, I guess this actually could have been directed to staff as well, but it has to do with the plastics part of the contract and also the staff report. The staff report references plastic 1 through 5. The contract itemizes plastics 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7. And so, and it identifies what types, must be high-density polyethylene and PVC and so forth. Is it, in fact, and then somebody, I think, said 1 through 6 at some point in the conversation up here. So which plastics are you actually taking? And if it's everything except for 6, what's wrong with 6, just out of curiosity?
6 is basically the styrofoam,
Okay.
and we do not have a market for that. So we just advertise 1 through 5, but we do accept 7 too, but it just seems kind of confusing to say 1 through 5 and 7.
Gotcha. Okay. But you will take the other hard plastics that are marked 7?
Yes, yes, and then we
Okay.
also take all the hard plastic, they call it, your kitty litter and your 5-gallon pails and landscape edging, all that kind of stuff also.
Great. Super. You mentioned foam. I saw egg cartons. I guess that's only the paper egg cartons then. So foam egg cartons would not be something that you
Yes,
take?
we have that listed under the corrugated and paper products,
Okay,
so
but
yes.
but if someone has foam cartons, they would not put
They
those
would
out?
not be acceptable, no.
Okay, great. Good to have that. And I'm sure you'll have that all very clear in the materials. A related materials question has to do with the definition. You're trying to, Marv is offering me candy to, I think he wants me to stop talking soon.
I asked you what number plastic that was, I thought, oh boy.
On the topic of scrap metals, how expansive a definition is that? And so I'm going to give you an example of a couple of things that have been found on property I own and I'm not sure what to do with.
Okay.
An old radiator, old huge cast iron radiator sitting in the basement. Is that something that you guys would now be taking away if somebody put it out on the curb?
Cast iron radiator, as big as that is, I mean, we couldn't actually put that in with our recyclables, but if you were one of our customers, we'd take it on what we call a small truck.
Okay.
We do take appliances, electronics, all that kind of stuff.
And would a customer need to notify you ahead of time, give a call to let you know that they were sticking an appliance out or something like that?
Yes, because we have a special truck to go around and pick that.
Okay, all right. And
items
so
up.
that'll also be part of the education is how people, if they,
Yeah, yeah. I
That's-
think we should be clear. He's talking about their trash customers.
Right.
all right, clarify that to me because I was asking this out of the context of scrap metal specifically for recycling.
See, we specify it's household scrap metal, anything
Okay.
that'll fit in your bin.
Gotcha.
Is how it's,
So here's another example then from an old brick outdoor fireplace, the grate. Somebody might have some kind of scrap like that or similar things, chunks of rusty rebar, stuff like that. Are those the sorts of things that and they'd be small enough that you could pick them up by hand on like a,
if it fits in a
200-pound.
recycling bin, yes, we will take it.
Okay, all right. That'll be good for folks to know. And let me just quick look through here. I'm impressed by the cost. And I realize that there's confidential trade information and so forth, but to what extent are you comfortable in saying in how much of your cost depends on what you get from the sale of the recyclables to make all this work? I mean, how much of the recycling is lowering your pickup cost on here?
Well, because of getting money from the marketplace is why we can initially give the city a lower price.
And obviously, you don't have the same, when comparing it to trash pickup, for example, you don't have the tipping fee expenses and other regulatory
Right,
type bills
yeah, on the
on
trash
top of it.
side, all the fees are up front. There's no way of us recouping anything. Or with the recycling, we can by marketing the recyclables.
Okay. I think that covered my questions.
Ms. Schoeneman?
I just thought of a question. Since you take a wider range of plastics than many other contractors, if your markets for those dwindle, do you have a way of stockpiling until it comes back, or do you then have to sell it for something else? Or this is a curiosity question.
Well, our facility is 11 acres. We have plenty of room to store materials if we need to. But since we've been doing this since 1990, it has not yet been a problem.
Thank you.
Do you have any particular questions that you want to ask us at all, or anything you want to tell us?
Just that